Hi, my name's Steve and welcome to the Seaside Allotment channel, and yes, it is me. I just haven't got my hat on today. So today we're going to talk about what I'm sowing and growing in August, but I'm also going to talk about September as well, because I think at this time it's useful to get a kind of view of the sowing timeline across the 2 months, because they're so critical. The timings are so critical if you want to grow over winter. And so yeah, I'm really kind of excited about this episode, because this is my thing, is really growing over winter, but also what you do now really does prepare you for early spring and the hunger gap. So it's such an important time, and I do recommend that you take a look at my tour video, because you'll see what's going on in the plot. And actually, while I'm talking, I might throw up a few photos just to illustrate some of the points. But we've got a lot of stuff in the ground for autumn and winter now. We've got a lot of beetroot, we've got a lot of potatoes, we've got a lot of brassicas, we've got a lot of carrots, so the time is kind of past really for most of those things. The only thing probably on the brassica family that you can really do now are some cabbages for spring, and if you've got a polytunnel like I have, you can start some kales and things like that for the polytunnel. And then in September you can start some of the brassicas that you're going to overwinter to get an early start. Well, actually in late winter and early spring, and obviously late spring. So there's loads and loads of fantastic opportunities, and it's all about timing. And the trouble is with timing, you don't know what the right time is, because although you can get a rough idea as to what you want to do in August and the middle of August and the end of August and early September, etc. It really does depend on the weather, and it really does depend on pests. You can have a whole load of things just wiped out, because you've got, say, cabbage root fly or something like that. So it really does pay to have a few spares. And just this afternoon I've wandered around the plot and I see all these little drooping brassicas. We've just had all this rain and they're drooping. Cabbage root fly, and you pull just give them a little tug, and the plant just comes out. It's got no roots to hold it in. It's just like a pencil pushed into the ground. And turn it upside down, and you'll see some little white maggots in there. And yeah, I hate them. Cabbage root fly. You don't know they're there until it's too late, and then you've had it. And obviously some people do put collars down, but around here it's so windy the collars just blow off. So it's not a very effective solution around here. So where I can, I use nets. But one of the things I'm going to be doing this year is I'm going to be watering with the Nemesis fruit and veg protection nematodes. And what I do with those is I water the brassicas in the plant pots before I plant them, so the whole plant pot gets a really good drenching of those nematodes, and then that protects the plant for the first couple of weeks, and at least it gets a bit of a start. And then after 2 weeks I'll water them again, and so they've at least had a month of growing. Whether I'll water them a third time, I don't know. It just depends whether I've got any of those nematodes going spare, because they're expensive to buy. I think they're about £6 if you buy them in the multi-packs or something like that. And so that's £6 every 2 weeks. So it gets pretty expensive. So I tend to only use them when I'm just sowing a big batch of brassicas, for example. But you can also use exactly the same packet of nematodes to kind of protect your carrots against carrot root fly, and onions against onion root fly and all of that. So they are kind of a universal nematode, but I just caution you, they're not 100% effective. So whilst it might reduce your losses from say 30% to 10%, you probably still end up with some losses. So with that, I think that's enough waffling. And so what we're going to do now is we're just going to have a look at the rather scrappy seedlings that I've got at home, and that's just because I don't know what to do with them. Normally I like to leave them outside on my patio on my little grow bench, which is protected from slugs, But I just, gales and drench, incredible like thunderstorms would just flatten these little tiny seedlings. So I got to keep them inside. But inside the next day, it's like blazing hot, and so it's too warm for them. So I've got to try to kind of put them outside again. And then, the next day, it's cloudy and raining again, and so I've got to bring them inside. And the poor little plants, I don't know what's happening. Yeah, and of course the pest pressure. I don't exactly know what's been eating them. Can't find any evidence of what's been eating them, but something's definitely been eating them. So that, just warn you now. Basically, they're looking a bit scrappy, but they should pull through. So I'm not too worried about them. So, yep. So let's have a look at the seedlings that I sowed last month and the month before. See how those are going. Got loads planted in the ground, and I've done videos basically of everything that I've been planted in the ground. So I'm not going to, normally what I do on these videos is I'll show you the seedlings that I planted from like the month before, and how they're doing. But because I've done videos separately showing all those, I don't think I'll bother repeating all that. So yeah, let's go home, look on the patio, and then we'll get on the computer and I'll show you what we planted, what we sowed in July. And I added a few bits and pieces that I didn't talk about in the July one. And for most of those, there's still time to sow those same things in August, and then I'll do the August one, and then we'll have a quick look at September, and then we'll be done. Okay, so here's the motley collection of seedlings that I've got. So I've got some lettuces, they're actually doing reasonably well. I've got some more lettuces that are starting over there, and you can see those got a bit leggy because they were started indoors, and not indoors to keep them warm, actually indoors to keep them cool in a cool bedroom. And so those started, but those haven't really come up yet. A bit of chard. First batch of my overwintering onions. So these are tough ball, are germinated pretty well. And these are, I can't remember what it's called, Senshi yellow or something like that, and they're just starting. Some chicories, which are doing quite well, but you can see maybe here, put some leaf miner on those, some of those. Anyway, hopefully they'll come along. A few more lettuces, terrible germination. It's basically too hot to germinate lettuces at this time of year, I think. But yeah, you just got to find a cool place for them. It's hard. Some perpetual spinach, which is just starting to show. Some, well, best forgotten really, Roxy lettuce, rubbish. Some more chicory, another tray of the same, Caesar and Palarossa. And then another tray of lettuces that are just starting to germinate, some red kitten, and a whole load of different kales. There's Reflex, which is a nice curly kale, early purple, that's sprouting broccoli, red boar, which is a red curly kale, salad rocket. It's a bit early for salad rocket, but it's nice to have a few. Most of my salad rocket I'll start in August. Some kale Nero and some Romanescos, and mostly really these are just spares. And you do need spares at this time because all sorts of pests can wipe you out. I've got some curly kale there just coming along. Yeah, we'll talk about pests in a minute. So these are my even more motley collection of brassicas, and I've basically got, there's not a lot of point going through them in detail because I'll show you on the computer, it's much easier to see. So I really just concentrate on some of the problems. So I've been watering these, and I'm just watering them in a tray, and I'm just giving them a bit of a tug to see if they're rooted, because probably 5%, 10% of them, when you give them that little tug, they just pull straight out, and that's because cabbage root flies in there and it's just eating the roots. So we can give them a little tug, they just pull out because there's no roots holding them in. And you can probably see lots and lots of leaf damage, and it's kind of unclear what is causing this. I never find any caterpillars. I've sprayed these with BT, and so if there are any tiny little caterpillars on here, hopefully the BT will get them. And because I've sprayed them with BT, I'm keeping them inside for a few days because the rain washes it off. And I've got some nice little tomatoes actually, and the intent with these tomatoes is that they'll be my very last succession, and so hopefully these will grow on in the conservatory and I'll have some tomatoes in the new year, well, for Christmas and the new year. And then I've got some peppers as well. I've got lipstick and Napier, and they're both early varieties, so I'm hoping to overwinter these on the windowsill, which is obviously why I've got some tiny little peppers. And yeah, so everything else I think I'll just show you on the computer. It's so much easier. But as you can see, these are quite motley. I mean, just look at this. I mean, obviously something's been eating this, but I can't find anything. No caterpillars. Shouldn't be any slugs. Yeah, it's tricky. Keep looking underneath, see if I've got any slugs kind of hiding, but I haven't found any. Anyway, I think they'll pull through, and of course I've got way more here than I need because, you know, compost free and seeds are effectively free, so why not sow a few extras? I probably only need half of what I've got here. Okay, so we're on the computer now, and if you've not seen my videos before, this is the database that I use to do all the tracking of everything, that all the varieties that I grow, when I sow them, when I harvest them, and all of that sort of thing. And yeah, and this database is freely available, and there's details in the description, and you can use it and modify it, do whatever you want with it. Put your own data in it, of course, or play around with my data. So we're just going to start quickly looking at the first harvest date. So these are the first harvests in the year of the things, and now these are the first harvests in July. So I harvested some really nice onions. They were variety radar, and some really grotty red onions. Those are electric. We've just finished processing those actually, and freezing them because they don't keep very well. Cherries, of course, French beans, amethyst, they're my favourite early season French beans. They're a dwarf variety. Lots and lots now of pickling onions, and Debbie's particularly keen on those because she really likes pickling gherkins, rather, not onions. Debbie really likes pickled gherkins. So the first time ever we've harvested Aztec broccoli, and I think it's kind of slightly misnamed. The broccoli side of it, obviously these are the flowers which give it the broccoli name, but it's really just like a true spinach. It's very, very similar to a true spinach. So it's very prolific, and at this time of year it's quite hard to get. Well, it's pretty much impossible really to get true spinach because it just bolts straight away. So this is a really great alternative for summer, as is New Zealand spinach. Harvested our first Burpee's golden beetroots in any quantity. Some stir-on onions. They're a main crop onion. We actually planted them in, I think it was December of last year. And we planted them out in February probably, and so we got a really nice early crop of those main crops. And then we got some really nice shallots. I was very pleased with those, overwintered as well. Kuka melons, they're a really nice addition to our salad mixes. And then we got some of our main crop tomatoes, so those are Sun Gold. And we also got some red cherries in decent quantities now. A little bit later, a couple of weeks later than last year when we had the amazing heat wave. yeah, some fantastic sweet corn. Again, a bit later than last year. We started it in the polytunnel, and then we moved the containers outside, and that gave us sweet corn just a few weeks early. Definitely worth it. Crown Prince, the first of our winter squashes, but you can harvest them early, of course. We've got so many of them. I think we've got about 50 fruits at the moment, so that's pretty good. Tumbling Tom Reds and Tumbling Tom Yellows actually in June, so they're not on this list. Zebrun shallots, fantastic crop of zebrun, and the first of the main crop potatoes, the Carolus, and yeah, they're a particular treat early on in the year. So those are the first harvests for July. So let's now look at what we sowed in July. So we sowed a lot of carrots. Some of those germination has been pretty patchy, unfortunately, and some of them have been fine. It's just whether you can get enough water on the ground to keep it moist on the really hot summer days. First set of clumps of sprouts. I really like growing sprouts in clumps. When you do it, you get plants with huge quantities of relatively small leaves rather than a small number of massive leaves. So if you like sprout leaves like I do, and you like the sprout tops, which I really do, then growing in clumps is the way to do it. Sowed some chard, sowed some tomatoes. And obviously it's incredibly late for tomatoes, but we like to get tomatoes at Christmas, and sowing them about this time or slightly earlier, you do get a harvest in Christmas, around Christmas and January. Some red rhubarb, which is a salad kale, which looks really nice. Bijou, which is a really nice lettuce, does better in the cooler months, so hopefully that's sort of maturing in September time. Lobjoit's green, another lovely crunchy carrot. Oh, it's been a long day. Lovely crunchy hearting lettuce. Moon red, which has not done very well this year, and actually germination has been terrible from the packet of seeds that I've been using, so I might have to change supplier for moon red because I'm not being very happy with it, but we do like the lettuce. Navara, Grenoble red and Tessie, all absolute favourites of mine, all growing really well now. In fact, we sowed them on the 13th of July, and we'll be planting them out in a few weeks' time, so they're doing really well. Shallots, yeah, we're still sowing, planting shallots. Every time we harvest a tub of potatoes, at the moment we're just bung some more shallots in for winter harvest. Red kitten spinach. It's really, the middle of July is probably the earliest you can start sowing spinach, but really now in August is better, so you'll see that, not August, autumn is better, and you'll see that when we get on to what I'm sowing and growing in August and September. A little bit of early purple, which is a purple sprouting broccoli. It's pretty much the end really of the opportunity to sow those. And some Romanesco cauliflowers, that'll be for winter harvest. I'm having a go at sowing some late cucumbers, which I'll grow on in the polytunnel, and hopefully I'll protect from the first frosts. So I'll see whether they actually mature in time. I might be a little bit late with those. Some reflex kale, some red boar kale, Roxy lettuce. And more interesting, I think, are now the chicories. So sowed some in July, and I'll sow some more. Well, actually, this is the second batch in late July. So those are up now, and I particularly like the chicories in the winter salad mixes. It just adds some colour and crunch, because we won't have any hearting lettuces at that time. So these just provide the crunch that you would get from a hearting lettuce. First batch of salad rocket, much earlier than that, and again it just goes to seed. and started to sow the overwintering onions. So this is the first batch. These are 2 classic overwintering onions from seed, and I like to sow stir on from seed as well, although it's not strictly a sort of Japanese onion. It does pretty well, and of course it can also be used for spring onions, and so I'll be sowing it that way. Probably my last batch of Nero kale, and of course I sowed some more shallots, and you see that just as a recurring theme. More and more shallots just going in every time a tub comes free. And so let's have a look at August and September. Now I've done these 2 together because I think it's kind of nice to see the whole of the autumn and winter planting kind of together as one collection of veg. So lots and lots of spring onions, bunching onions, whatever you like to call them, going in. Loads and loads of trays of those. Stir on being sowed, both to overwinter and be harvested as an early main crop, but also lots of spring onions, stir on spring onions. They work fine as spring onions. In fact, they're one of our favourites. Another batch of overwintering onions, just as a reserve really. I mean, the seeds are free effectively. Once you've sown your first batch, you always too many in the seed packet, so sowing some reserves is always worthwhile. And some calabrese, marathon, again that'll be ready in winter. Some more sprouts sown in clumps for the leaves. Some perpetual spinach to go in the cold frames. More shallots rather. Watermelon or red meat radish, which we've never actually sown successfully as a radish, but we quite like the radish tops in smoothies, so it's really nice to have a wide variety of leaves for your winter smoothies. And the radishes just keep going all the way through winter. They're amazing for that. And then these are my main favoured lettuces for growing in winter. So there's Freckles, Bijou, this that I can't pronounce, but basically I think it's Marvel of all seasons or something. Grenoble Red, fantastic lettuce, that's the one we grow the most of. Roxy, and so all of those are destined for the cold frames in sometime in September, early September. The cold frame lids won't go on until the end of September, sort of early October, depending on the weather. This is my main sowing of rocket. You don't need that many plants because they're fairly big and pretty prolific. And then the spring cabbages, and I've sowing 2, Duncan and Wheeler's Imperial. And then red ruble, which I mentioned before, which is a salad kale. And then my main sowings of spinach, so there'll be red kitten, Medania, and so that'll go in one of the hoop tunnels. Basically, my hoop tunnels are just cold frames with basically 2 1 metre squared sections, and so red kitten goes in 1 metre squared and the Medania goes in the other. Some Napoli carrots, which will go into containers, and then they'll go in the polytunnel and sit on the trestle table where they get quite a lot of sun, and so they'll be for the winter harvest. French breakfast radish, of course, and I've not put every succession of those in. Some more spring onions, and then a later sowing of this watermelon radish, and this is the one which is targeted at leaves. It's unlikely, I think, that the radishes will form, but that's actually what we want, because we just want them for the leaves, and as I say, they're pretty prolific and excellent. And then these are the lettuces for the polytunnel. So those a bit later, because the polytunnel doesn't come free for the salads until October time, early October, when we take out the tomatoes and the peppers, and we replace those with Navara, Roxy, Grenoble Red and Bijou. And then I've also got hoop tunnels which are also full of peppers, so they will come free again sometime in September, early October, depending again on the weather and when they ripen. And then in there will go giant winter and red kitten spinach. And then in the bed where I'm just harvesting the onions, that's where the well, it's not a broad bean, but the field beans will go. And these are very like a broad bean, but you just harvest the tips. And so if you look at that photo, you basically harvest them when they're that size. So you pinch the tips out, they throw up another shoot, you pinch that tip out, they throw up another shoot, you pinch that tip out, and you just do that again and again and again, all the way through December, January, February, March. Then you clear that bed and you plant it. You leave the roots in, of course, because it's absolutely full of nitrogen, because you've not allowed the plant to grow big and flower and set beans. If you do that, then the nitrogen in the roots is pretty much depleted. Now, the most difficult time of year for salads is December and January. And fortunately, that is the time when the miner's lettuce and the lamb's lettuce and the salad rocket are all still growing really nicely, as is the Mizuna. And so there's a nice range of those. And then I'll sow some more spring cabbage, and I'll overwinter those plants in pots, small pots, in the polytunnel, and I'll plant them out in February, March time for early spring cabbages, a succession to the ones that were growing outside. And then some more things for overwintering. So basically some more calabrese, and some cauliflowers, and some Romanesco cauliflower, although it's more of a broccoli. And all of those are for early harvests. And I'll do some more of those in October as well for early harvests. And then, of course, I'll do some early in late winter next year. So that is pretty much it. That is almost everything we'll be sowing this year, although we do sow some more lettuces late and some more spring onions late and some more, as I said, brassicas for overwintering. But everything else that we sow, the stuff in October and November, is all for overwintering, for harvesting in early spring. Not for eating in late autumn and winter and early spring, which is all this stuff. So hopefully that is quite an interesting selection. It's quite interesting to hear that some people have stopped sowing for the year, whereas of course I've got just masses of sowing still to do. So I thought I would just show you another view onto the same database, and this one has been grouped by the planting location. I'm not going to go through it, but if you take a look at the database, then you'll see this view is available to you, and it basically shows you where everything is being planted. So which things are suitable for polytunnels, which things go in these low tunnels, or hoop tunnels as I call them, what things go outside without any protection at all, and what goes in cold frames, what goes in the polytunnel. And a few things do actually just go in these mesh tunnels, and the advantage of the mesh tunnels is it just keeps the snow and the hail and a little bit of the wind off things, and so it just gives them that little bit of protection. It cuts down the light levels, but some things just don't mind. The rocket and the lamb's lettuce and the miner's lettuce just do just fine in a mesh tunnel. So there we go. I hope that was useful. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I certainly enjoyed doing it, and I'll see you soon.